Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the two-man game. I'm Bob Ramsey. That's my partner, Matt Rocchio, right here on Claibs Online. And it is truly March Madness. We're knee-deep in it, Rock. What a start. We've had upsets galore starting on Thursday. We're in the third day, and it keeps coming.
Oh yeah, obviously, obviously St. Peter's over Kentucky, the big one, the Peacocks, 15 over the two. Obviously, I'm a Mizzou guy, so anytime another one of those two goes down to a 15, it makes me a little more happy in kind of a very Schadenfreude kind of way. But now, obviously, today with UNC over Baylor, it's crazy when in a moment on Twitter, it seems like the number one seed, one of the number one seeds, became an underdog because of the way the game was going. But I mean, that was incredible. You can talk about some questionable officiating. Obviously, UNC taking the big lead, the ejection, the big comeback, overtime. It had everything that you could possibly want in a tournament game.
It was not a game today, and let's talk about the tipping point moment. It was a blowout. The game was over, and Carolina's best player gets thrown out of the game for a flagrant two. Now, I love underdogs, and so even though I had Baylor in my bracket, I just love the 8-1 underdog story,
Absolutely.
and it was hard to believe that they were blowing them out that badly. I mean, it was really I couldn't fathom it. And so to see it, I was rooting for it. And then the flagrant two, I asked around, called a couple of coaches that I know, and because I was saying, come on, isn't that just a flagrant and a technical? The
Yeah.
elbow was up. But of the people I talked to, and then obviously everybody at the game thought that, the three zebras. So on my little sample size, it was unanimous that it was the right call. What do you think?
I honestly I thought it was a flagrant one. I thought that was the call when I initially saw it, and
Me too.
I still kind of think that because I think that you can argue that while yes the elbow's high, that it was kind of within him trying to get position and play the ball, and so it's not. I don't think it had obviously you can't let your elbow get that high because today's game you just can't be going around wildly like that, but. I don't think it had any malicious intent to it. I think it was kind of within the game in a way to the point where I think it's a flagrant one, and I mean it just changed the game so much. And obviously that's an unfortunate happenstance. But I mean really, that's not the only complaint I had from the refs. That was questionable calls the entire game. I mean literally from tip off until all the way throughout overtime. That was a very questionably called game by the officials.
It's funny. I, as you know, and anyone who knows my work, I am not. I don't hold back when it comes to the way games are called. Uh, but I'm getting from people inside the game, people that I know around the game, who are um, really disappointed in the way officiating's going in the NCAA tournament. And one theory was is that while the NCAA and their committee, their tournament committee, um, denies it, that it seems to be to some folks pretty clear that they're trying to get all the different leagues represented in by officials, and it's not 100% by merit. And at the same time, remember that you've got the men's Division One, men's Division Two, well, all the NCAA divisions, men and women, plus the NIT, plus the CBI. Now, you're still going to get the bulk of the good officials on your men's Division One, but still, as these rounds and these tournaments progress, you're theoretically going to get better and better officials as we go. Um, and then the other thing is, like players, officials are working 5, 6, 7 days a week all year, and we're in March, and fatigue can also be a factor. So I think there are a number of things that could be affecting what we're seeing. And on the other hand, maybe it's just that the game is so athletic, so fast, so physical and powerful that it's hard for anybody to keep up.
And I think probably it's all those aspects kind of combining and coming to a head in some egregious calls. But I just think sometimes there's just bad crews and just certain guys just kind of a little bit too
Overwhelmed.
a little bit overwhelmed. And my issue with, and I think overwhelmed is a good word, because my biggest problem is wishy-washy refs who call it one way in the first quarter, one way in the second quarter, and then one way completely differently, let's say in overtime. It's just those kind of things, or first half and second half, because we're talking college basketball. But I was watching the NBA last night and getting frustrated. It's just one of those things where it's just I want consistency, and I think that was my biggest problem from the refs in this UNC Baylor game. The only consistency there was just the fact that every way the ball was going, it was bad calls, and there was I mean, it's true, and there was a moment in the overtime and late in the fourth where it tipped towards a lot of bad calls going towards Baylor, but I don't think UNC was getting a ton of
Favorable.
calls earlier in the game. It was both ways. Teams were just getting crap calls, and it was just a badly officiated crew. Obviously, the people on Twitter were saying, make sure this crew never officiates a game this tournament. Like you said, I really do think we're talking about the NCAA tournament. It should be the best groups from college basketball at the NCAA tournament, as the majority, the overwhelming majority. It doesn't make sense to dilute the officiating pool when it comes to the NCAA tournament. I know that might be stupid, but I mean, we're talking about not one of the most premier times in college sports, but one of the most premier events in sports. Get it right.
Here's part of the problem, and I don't know how to fix it. But to address your point of one end of the floor, something's called, and the other end, identical play called the other way. Block charge is one of the easiest ones to use as an example. Well, look at the rotation of the players. The guy who called the block charge one way on one end is not in that same baseline position on the other end. He's out high as they shift and rotate through the game. I don't know how you fix it, because you can't expect the guy to sprint from one end line to the other. I think the key is, again, how do you get to the point, is to have crews work together more and recognize Rocchio just called that a block charge. Okay, that's how he called it. He set the precedent. Now I've got to follow his precedent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that makes sense, and I think that's why having these crews that can work together across games is always an important thing, because you can get a feel for it and you can start to understand. And I'm sure these guys get together and talk about, and they overlook the calls. But again, that's also why the grading system and taking only by merit the best crews to the NCAA tournament matters. Again, I'm not trying to say that Missouri State should get screwed by a bad crew in the NIT, but it's just you gotta take a look at the fact of the matter, which is the NCAA tournament. It's the oil for all the wheels in the cogs, in the machinery of college basketball at every single level across both women's and men's sports. That's just how it works, and so you got to get it right. It was a great game despite the bad calls. RJ Davis, you talked about Manic having the game he was having. They had 50 points combined, him and R.J. Davis, when he got ejected. Baylor, with the defense they play, even when they are missing a guy like L.J. Cryer, the defense they play, just seeing two players combined for 50 like that is just something I never expected. Manic gets ejected. R.J. Davis goes cold for about the last 9 minutes of the game, scores 3 points the last 9 minutes, only scored 3 points in overtime. They were maybe the most three important points with that and one layup he got, but I mean, for him to go cold like that and for Baylor just to take over, that was impressive. There's a reason that UNC, despite being a fairly good team, has, I think, 5 losses by 20 points or more this season. And you saw at times how young they are, and how mistake-ridden that team can be. I mean, we saw one of the most comical passes I've ever seen in college in the NCAA tournament.
Crazy.
And really that pass was a crazy microcosm of just the youth and inexperience of the UNC team, because he got trapped in the middle of the court and his bailout was to dribble backwards into the sideline. And consistently Baylor would trap UNC, their guards would do that, or their guards would dribble into the corner. And it's just textbook not the right decision-making at all, and yet they were still able to win the game because there's a lot of talent there. I thought if you're a UNC fan, that was probably such a frustrating game, not just because you almost gave up the biggest lead ever, but just because it made so much sense in that first half. You were like, wow, if we could have been doing this, we would have been one of the best teams in the ACC. And then slowly but surely, those mistakes and that inexperience started creeping back in. That had to be frustrating.
Well, to discuss that point first, I think when you talk about that frustration, I think the key is we learned that youth was not able to change momentum back when Manic got thrown out, and it clearly changed the momentum. And they didn't know how, as a youthful group, to stop the momentum. And they probably tried too hard to change it back instead of slow it down, let it come to you, run your offense. But the problem now, that's easy to say, but Baylor's trying to make you go fast and mess you up. And so that's how momentum gets going. The other thing about that pass, I want to ask you, we all agree he had good vision and he saw his teammate all alone under the basket.
He did, yeah, you're right.
Was he trying to throw it directly to him, or was he trying to throw an alley-oop? Because either would have been good, but he picked the middle, which is just 10 feet out of bounds.
Just skied it. I have no idea what he was going. I felt like he was trying to kind of lob it in there and just put way too much on it when he jumped like that. But I mean, it was just a weird decision. It was the kind of decision making that the UNC guards had the entire game. I mean, they're incredibly talented, and with a guy like R.J. Davis and with a St. Louisan like Caleb Love, if he can start finding his game, he had a little bit of a rough spot today. There's obviously a lot of talent there. UNC is going to be dangerous here, kind of moving on. I had a feeling Baylor was going to be a little bit vulnerable because of the injuries they had, but I never thought they were going to have that kind of game against UNC. But, I mean, what a way to start freaking day 3. And now we got Kansas Creighton's about to tip off as well. I mean, it's
great
just,
games.
it's just basketball heaven right now.
Yeah, great marquee type games all day long. Obviously, I'm going to be looking Richmond, Providence, 2 non-football schools, and Richmond's got football, but it's low level. And St. Mary's, UCLA, being a West Coast guy, I cannot wait for that game. Randy Bennett is an old friend. I've liked UCLA since I was a kid, and John Wooden was winning championships.
Not to.
Murray State has a great chance to advance, and then the nightcap, Memphis and Gonzaga. I mean, marquee games all the way through the day and the night. This is an exciting day for basketball.
And yeah, talk about another, and I guess that's a 9-1. But I mean, UNC Baylor, we're talking about 3 or 4 potential NBA players. Memphis Gonzaga, we're talking about 4 or 5 potential NBA players. I mean, that's such an incredible slate. I mean, it really has been a great tournament already. Obviously, you get the St. Peter's, and now you have some of the big name teams stepping up. You had Illinois making that comeback yesterday against Chattanooga. That was a fascinating game. Kofi Cockburn really took over and made his mark. That was really impressive. You brought up Murray State. That was the first in 36 hours of Todd Golden breaking my heart. Obviously, the first time losing when I had him picked, and I thought that was going to be my upset run this season. And then second, when he got hired by Florida, which brings us into kind of our second basketball news break on Twitter earlier today. Obviously, Baylor, UNC being the big thing everyone's talking about. The other thing, a little bit more localized, is that it looks like the decision for Missouri to hire Dennis Gates from Cleveland State is on its way to the Board of Curators. So essentially all it needs to be is approved by the higher-ups at Mizzou, and then the Missouri Tigers have their next head basketball coach. From the tiny little Twitter bubble I'm in, because that's what Twitter is, I understand that, Mizzou fans are not happy about this hiring right now. I honestly don't know what would have made Mizzou fans happy, because there's a weird pocket that honestly I don't think would have been happy with anything other than like Kim English or some ridiculously high-name coach like Sean Miller. That was not going to happen. And then there's another one that just I think would have been angry about just anything that isn't a premier Power 5 coach that has won multiple times. And so people are pissed off. People are throwing out the 1-20 record against top 150 teams in his time at Cleveland State. It's a weird decision. It's a weird reaction that I'm seeing from the fans right now. I'm actually pretty okay with it.
I don't know Coach Gates. I've never met him. Wouldn't know him if he walked up to me. Um, I think his resume is pretty good. Um, you talk about that 1-20. If he was 10-10 at Cleveland State against ranked opponents, he wouldn't be at Cleveland State.
Exactly.
He has Cleveland State talent.
Exactly, and I think the bigger thing people are focusing in is his 8 years as an assistant at Florida State University, and he apparently was really important to their recruiting down there and his time down there. They got a number of 5 stars: Jonathan Isaac, who obviously went on to the NBA; Dwayne Bacon, who went on to the NBA. I believe before he left, he was involved in the early stages of Scotty Barnes, who has now gone on to the NBA as well. So, I mean, this is a guy who was around premier talent. He's a Chicago, Illinois native, so he's got some Midwest roots. And obviously, Cleveland State, he didn't, recruit obviously any, have any big recruiting, standouts there, but he was filling a team with JUCOs and transfers a lot of the times. Some people are focusing in on him not being a exceptionally talented offensive coach because of his time with Leonard Hamilton, who's obviously known for being, an athletic defensive kind of coach, and people want to compare him to Conzo Martin. Looking at his Cleveland State numbers, though, I mean, they were a +6 team. So they scored 75 points and allowed 69 points per game this year across the entire season, non-conference and conference. That differential has been achieved only 4 times in the last 15 years by a Cleveland State coach, and it's the first time in 7 years that a coach got there. When he got there, they were scoring 64 and allowing 71 points per game his first season. That kind of turnaround is extremely positive. His offense this year, again, with a lot of veteran players, so it's going to be easier to think, put something together than a bunch of young kids. The offense was better than average and was much better than the defense if you look at national rankings and things like that. So people who want to pigeonhole him as this is the kind of coach he is because of the kind of coach Leonard Hamilton is, I think that's overlooking it, because obviously there's a lot of assistants on a basketball staff, and you don't know who's impacting what or whose job is exactly what. We know that it's been reported that he had a big impact on the recruiting at Florida State, and so that's a big positive. Again, I'm not over the moon necessarily, but the people who are whoa and the sky is black right now for Mizzou fandom, I just think that's a ridiculous reaction right now.
I think so. I'm kind of where you are, because again, I must be honest, like most of America, I don't follow Cleveland State, but I think his resume is solid, not great, not overwhelming, not wow, but solid. He's paid his dues. He took a program that was down. He made him competitive. But I do get it's a gut feel. It's not real analytics. I admit that up front. There's my disclaimer. It almost feels like an administration that's trying to show everybody how smart they are. Nobody had this guy on their list. We're smarter than you, and we'll show. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to take a shot, but it's got that feel.
I had you were 2 words into that sentence, and I pretty much could have predicted the rest of it. I had a feel what you were going to say there. It does kind of feel like that, but again, I would have loved Todd Golden, and I think Mizzou was in on him. He just went to Florida, and I don't think you can really fault Todd Golden in making that decision. They have national championships this century.
And palm trees.
That too, and yes, exactly. See all this sunshine behind me? They have that all the freaking time.
Yeah,
I can't blame him.
The columns are nice.
Exactly.
But they ain't palm trees.
That's very fair. And the Sean Miller thing, listen, LSU went to the tournament and then fired their coach because they just woke up one day 2 weeks ago with allegations on their desk all over again because this FBI thing hasn't completely wrapped up. To hire a guy like Sean Miller, I know Xavier's about to do this, and I think it's colossally stupid to hire a coach like that when there is still clearly NCAA investigators trying to find out what went down here. I think would have been unbelievably risky, and I'm completely fine with Mizzou not taking that risk. I think it would have been dumb, even with the way that the NIL money's changed things. Again, I'm not, some, high scruples, high morals when it comes to basketball. If the FBI thing was completely done and gone, I'd probably be okay with hiring Sean Miller. But literally LSU just got served again with with a potential notice, and the majority of this, there's some little football things in there, but the majority of it has been reported as being on the basketball team, and then immediately a week later, not immediately, a week later, Will Wade, despite being a tournament team, catches the axe for that, and so
Mm-hmm.
that would have been colossally stupid, I think, for Mizzou to jump in on it. And I'll say the same if it actually goes down that Xavier is going that way. But I think there's the question here with Mizzou obviously is going to be, can he make an impact on the transfer portal, and can he make an impact recruiting? Can he come into St. Louis in a way that a lot of Mizzou coaches haven't been able to and get some of that talent? That's going to be the big question there. It's not as easy as saying, shut down the borders. What are you going to do to close down the borders? That's going to be the big question here. Already, Aiden Shaw, no one's surprised, announced that he's going to reopen his recruitment. That was the one big name that Mizzou had. No surprise there. But I'm not 100% down on Dennis Gates. I'm ready to be excited by a coach who's knows what he wants to recruit, which is long, athletic, positionless basketball. And despite the fact that that has been a lot of times with Missouri over the last few years and with a lot of college basketball, despite the fact that that has been associated with people trying to just play defense and cover up for not being able to coach offense by having a bunch of athletes, I think this guy is different and has clearly shown it that if he has the veterans and the players to run his offense, he can put something together.
Final thing for me on the hire for University of Missouri Columbia, and that is, I would caution folks not to look at the unknown or unknown factors as negative factors. We tend to, all of us do that. Well, I never heard of that. It must not be good. I don't care whether you're talking about a new restaurant or a college basketball coach or a baseball man. You can pick your topic. We too frequently, and I mean all of us, look at the unknown factor as negative. I caution you fans not to do that and to give the guy a chance. And I don't mean, okay, welcome. We'll go by, we'll go out to dinner and yeah, come on, welcome. But give him time to build. It's a hard time to build right now. And if you're going to go out and make the hire, the show you're smarter than everybody, you should give yourself time to make that be true.
And I honestly think that just overall across all college sports, the idea that coaches need more time needs to be a little bit more popular. The way that teams want to move on is crazy, and I know that a lot of people would logic it out and say that in today's day and age with the transfer portal and NIL, it makes even more sense to have a shorter leash. But honestly, it still comes down to being able to recruit players and develop them across 2 or 3 years, even with the one and done, even with the NIL, even with the fact that sometimes you just got to play a guy because you want to keep him happy and stay here. And that was a problem that Konzo had. The complexion has changed in college basketball, but you still got to give these guys time to build a program, especially a program that, unfortunately, Konzo Martin did not leave that much better off than he got it. He got it in shambles, and he got a quick boost with the Porters. But unfortunately now when you look at who's here, you got Trevon Brazile, great young player, but there's not a whole lot for fans to get excited about unless you really want to dig deep. So I'm cautiously optimistic. That's my final place right now on the Mizzou coaching hire.
So let's switch to St. Louis University, who fell flat in their NIT game, and Northern Iowa and AJ Green really put on a spectacular show. I already admired them from afar and seen them up close and personal. They were frighteningly good. Most people know now that the Billikens lost Yuri Collins, and I got to tell you, before the game, watching, and I couldn't. We did our podcast prior to the game, and I already knew Yuri wasn't going to play, but I couldn't say anything about it. It hadn't been released yet. During the shoot around, right before we went on, in street clothes, I saw Yuri and Javante Perkins. Those two injuries bookended the season and really told the story of the season. And it was a tough way to end the year, Rock. And we've already seen now Mark I. Strickland going into the portal. I'm not surprised. And in fact, I could have predicted it. And had Mark come to me, I would have said, you probably need to go somewhere where you can play. You've been on the bench 2 years, you've got too many gifts. And for those of us who thought, gosh, he should be playing, then he got to play, missed 2 dunks, and spectacular play, crazy play. Now, if you're in the Strickland family, you would say, well, he's making mistakes because he's not playing enough. So, it's a conundrum that doesn't really have an answer. And Markai will get a chance to prove himself. And he's a great young man. And I think he'll do really well if he gets to go somewhere where he can play lots of minutes.
Yeah, and just with the way that COVID kind of changed the eligibility in years for everybody, it also, it's something that the math that the way that SLU kind of needed the math to break out, it's not terrible for them too, because if Javonte Perkins, as we've all kind of speculated and believe is going to happen, if he returns, they needed to have one more spot open, because right now with DeAndre Jones and Martin Linson out, and they got Sincere Parker and Kramer coming in. That's the scholarship
and
right there.
Kellen Thames.
And Kellen Thames coming in. So that's the scholarships right there. So, it's tough to see a guy like Markai out, who was obviously, beloved on this team, had a lot of close friendships on this team. Clearly, you could see the way he reacted as a bench guy. He was a great bench reaction guy. I love guys who, even if they're not getting minutes, are still excited for their teammates. But the math does kind of work out in a way that SLU maybe needed. SLU's not going to be hurt, I should say, by one or two of these players deciding that they can get minutes elsewhere, because it's a deep team, and it's because, again, those extra years, it's still kind of a young team despite all the experience. And so these are the kind of the things that are going to happen. And I think that game against Northern Iowa, it's hard to gauge anything without a Yuri Collins, because just the momentum, the confidence, the consistency you have from him, both offensively and defensively, just immediately goes out the window, and now you got to play everything else on the fly. And so it's hard for me to really react to that, but even with those final games, it's hard not to be really excited about what a healthy St. Louis squad, with those people we just talked about, Sincere Parker, Kramer, and Thames coming in, with a healthy Javonte Perkins, what they could possibly be next year. I'm already excited about it, and, college basketball isn't even done for this year.
I have no inside information. I mean that sincerely. I still think you'll probably get a couple of more transfers. Yeah. And again, this is my opinion, completely separate from what the official staff opinion is, perhaps. I don't know. And that is, I still think the Billikens, because DeAndre Jones leaves, I think they need a true point guard backup. How do you get somebody really good who knows they might get to play 5 minutes a game? I don't know the answer to that. 2, I'd love to have a true power forward.
That's also fair.
To go with Traore and Okoro. Or if you tell me you think Traore is really more of a 4 at 6'8", I could buy that, because he's got the good footwork to get out and guard on the perimeter. He could guard a stretch 4.
He does. Yeah,
maybe another true 5 to more directly replace Linson. So I think they still need a couple of those things.
Yeah, and like I said, I think we'll probably see one or two more other transfers that'll open up a room for a grad transfer or something along those lines for them to make a move. And I think SLU will be active about that, because I think a little bit more size and the ability to play a 4-out offense while not sacrificing 4 or 5 inches on the other end would be important for them. And then also getting that backup point guard. Obviously, Travis Ford, he understands the need to hold down that position, especially when Yuri goes out. He, of all people, would talk about the struggles they would have anytime Yuri would have to sit. And so that's right. Those are definitely the big needs, and I expect SLU to attack, if not both of them, at least one of them pretty hard here in the offseason.
Yeah, the league in basketball in general has gotten so long and big that it's really, really hard to have multiple little guys on the floor. And I think it cost the Bills a little bit in matchups this year. Not always. Sometimes the matchup was in their favor. Sometimes. Yeah. But by and large, I'm seeing other schools, a 6'7" point guard and 6'7" 2 guards on You look, it's a little, and guys like AJ Green, who I think's listed at 6'4", but already has an NBA body.
Yeah, I
You
no,
know,
I love basketball because, like I said, you have 6'7" point guards, you have 6'7" shooting guards, and at the exact same time, you'll have a team that has a 6'4" power forward and a 6'6" center. It's beautiful. I love it. It's chaos. It's the ultimate way. My favorite part about basketball has always been, you know, every time we get to a point in the sport where more and more people are saying, I don't care how you do it, just get the ball in the net more times than the other team does it. I
yeah,
don't like it's why I love Nikola Jokic in the NBA because he does these goofy weird scoops and like pats of the ball and it's just like it doesn't have to be this stoic,
right.
chest passing, this is the way we have to play the game. It's just do what you can to get the ball in the net more than the other team, and we'll figure out, the technicalities of it later. And that's what I love about basketball currently, both in the NBA and in college, and the positionless thing, and just the idea of a more open game. It's more fun, and I just think it's more about
Yeah,
it. More, it really does, I think, take to the heart of what basketball has always been.
great point. So you mentioned NBA. Let's switch and talk NBA. Let me get us started with a couple of easy questions. One was, I thought midseason when you made some predictions, I thought Cleveland would fade, and they've had a little fade in the last week, say 2 weeks, but they come back with a big win last night, and I'm not after I saw that performance. Now I don't know where I stand on the Cleveland El Fado.
Well, I mean, the guards just keep him are keeping him there, and despite losing Jared Allen, we talked about how they had 3 7-footers, so they still have 2 7-footers left. They've fallen from fourth to sixth, since that prediction, so they've kind of taken a little bit of the dip. I
Yeah,
thought they're 4-6 in their last 10. But they're still playing good basketball, and the Heat and they beat a West team last night. But the East is just such a juggernaut, and we've seen a little bit of the movement. The Heat are still number one. The Bucks and the 76ers have both jumped up a little bit. The Celtics have jumped up. The Bulls have fallen. The Cavs have fallen. And the Raptors and Nets are pretty much right around where they've been the entire time. And so I really liked that Cleveland stayed into it. For me, last night especially, the big game I was locked in on was that Raptors-Lakers game. LeBron was obviously incredible. Russell Westbrook had a triple-double. He was better than he has been. But for me, the big takeaway had to be a guy I already mentioned earlier when we were talking about Florida State. That's Scotty Barnes. Oh my lord! And if this like pops up on a replay ever, Rammer, you need to watch this game because this is a 6'7" small forward who scored, I believe, 4 different baby hooks,
wow.
moving into the paint, kind of like inside of 3 defenders, late in his dribble, 6 or 7 dribbles to get in the paint, working through guys, little pivots, little step around dribbles, and then going up and raising up into a little baby hook for a rookie small forward. I mean,
Yeah,
it was a crazy little game that he's kind of shown in pockets. But and not only that, he hit like 4 hook shots in the paint. Then he had like 4 or 5 floaters in the paint as well over LeBron. He was running the pick and roll at one point. He he's not a great 3-point shooter, but he's good enough. This is the perfect example of a guy who's just good enough that you have to close out, and then he just murders you on closeouts. Scotty Barnes is so much fun to watch. I think there were some people who, when they saw him go top 5 this past year, they weren't really sure about who this kid from Florida State was, but I mean,
yeah.
he's put his name on the map. He has been so much fun to watch, and he along with Pascal Siakam's return, it's a big reason why the Raptors have made a jump.
And one more team I was interested in because they were under my radar a little bit. And I know we haven't talked a lot about them, but they've won 3 in a row and 9 out of 10 in the Timberwolves.
Yep, I mean, I love Anthony Edwards. Gosh, he's one of my favorite players. And Karl Anthony Towns, I know he
Yeah.
catches a lot of shrift for being soft, but I don't think we don't give enough credit to the fact that he is the greatest shooting big man, and the numbers tell us it's nowhere even close. Even with the guys like Joel Embiid are able to shoot the ball at times. No. Karl Anthony Towns takes 7 or 8 threes per game and hits them at like a 45% clip, and he's 7 feet tall. It's
Wow.
ridiculous. If he can just continue to turn some of that offensive production into defensive effort. His effort's gotten so much better. I don't want to say that he's not giving effort on defense, but because it's so cliche when we talk about the NBA. But it's still not to the level it can be when he has that kind of athleticism at that size. The biggest thing is, if you take some of that offensive heft off him, maybe he can start giving more effort on the defensive end. And a guy like Anthony Edwards, he's been such a beautiful surprise coming in, obviously, as the number 1 overall pick. He was this recruit out of Georgia, and everyone talked about how he loved football more than basketball. So they questioned whether he would, have the passion to play basketball at the next level. And then you just slowly find out through interviews with this kid that he just thinks he's the greatest person at everything. And I've talked about this on the pod before, but
he should be on a podcast with us.
It's my favorite anecdote I've ever heard. When apparently in the locker room they'll be like, "Hey Anthony, you think you're a good skier?" And he'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'm the best skier in the world. I could be Olympic if I wanted to be." Like, Anthony, you think you ever gone fishing? I don't think I've ever gone fishing, but I bet you I could be on that Bassmasters thing on ESPN in a year or two. Like, he legitimately believes that you just give him a task and he will become one of the best in the world at it. And I love that attitude. He shit talks already at an all-pro level, and his play is just below that. I love the Timberwolves, and good for them. That's a basketball fandom that has been tortured for far too long, and I hope something breaks their way finally.
Yep. And so before we get together, prior to the Sweet 16, anything else in the NBA to look for in the next 3 or 4 days?
I haven't looked a lot because I'm gonna be watching so much of these college games. I lock into the NBA more than the college game during the regular season. But this is my time when I'm just I go college crazy. So I'll pick up some NBA games here, kind of on commercial breaks. But I'm all round 2 until the Sweet 16 this weekend, Rammer.
All right. Well, we'll get together next week and we'll take a look at the Sweet 16 and see what we got. And I would just tell folks,
St. Louis Acura is the only.
Buckle you. That's all right. That's like being played off at the Oscars.
It's a touchpad got me.
So we'll get together again next week. I'm Bob Ramsey. That is my partner, Matt Rocchio. It is the 2-man game on Claibs Online. We'll see you next time.
Point to me to cue. Point to me. Okay, we good?
St. Louis Acura is the only Acura dealer in the nation to win the Precision Team Award for 30 years. How do we do it? By making you, our customers, our number 1 priority. As others increase their fees and take advantage of limited inventory, we keep our prices low because we remain committed to becoming better than ever and treating you as we want to be treated. We want you coming back and sending your friends and family to a veteran-owned, family-based business you can trust. St. Louis Acura, better than ever for you.